Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Joy Show. This is a show that show show. I washed it, can't do a thing with it. This show is all about the uniqueness of every one of us and how joy comes from accepting that there's just one you. So celebrate that. I'm really grateful that you're here today. Well, let us begin with the land acknowledgement. I am so grateful that as we gather today, we acknowledge that we're standing on the historical land of the Wendat peoples and more recently, that of the Mississaugas and the Haudenosaunee nations. And it's now home to many diverse First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island. May we walk alongside our Indigenous family, recognizing our shared stewardship of the earth, unity, understanding, and resilience that we've been reminded of through our reflections. Let us hold in our hearts the intention to learn, to support, and to advocate for justice and sovereignty for us all. In doing so, we acknowledge our interconnectedness and the strength that comes from standing together in truth, respect, and love. May this intention guide us in our actions and thoughts, inspiring us to contribute to a world where the dignity and rights of all are honored. Let us be mindful of the role we play in this ongoing journey towards healing and unity. And by making these acknowledgements, we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation by honoring the land, the history, as well as the unique heritage and culture of the Canadian Indigenous people and the American Indigenous peoples. This fosters our commitment to create a world that works for the highest and best good of all life. So please take a moment to acknowledge your personal commitment to the land you are on and the path you choose to use walking forward. Miigwech. Well, today I have an extra special guest. Aren't all my guests extra special? Well, Gigi Grant is a remarkable woman, a trans person living on the unceded territory of the Mississaugas Anishinaabe. She has dedicated her work to community justice movements and mobilizing people against unjust systems and policy for more than 20 years. She's a fine artist and poet. She has staged many public art interventions to emphasize community power and place. Her poetry and compositions have been published in a number of literary publications and most recently in Displacement City on the University of Toronto Press. She's also a transparent and wife and is deeply in love with her wife and child, of course, her beautiful son, and of course, her garden. Please welcome Gigi Grant. I am so grateful that you are here.
Hi.
Welcome. So, you have got this long list of accomplishments. Tell me about your poetry. I am really intrigued.
That's really fascinating. I had a friend tell me recently that a lot of artists nowadays are mostly doing writing work because it's the type of thing that people really want to consume these days, less than visual arts. And so I guess I kind of tuned into that because my poetry is really an extension of like a lifelong pursuit of visual arts. And I liked how words looked, and from a very young age, I would my mom has a very special kind of cursive writing, and I was always very envious of it and tried to practice and like copy the way that she wrote. And so I've always really like appreciated how like the written word looks visually, and so I guess
Yeah.
like my poetry is an extension of that. Um, and in part too, like I try to convey personal messages about like deeply political things,
Mhm.
um, especially like around gender and sexual identity, but also about displacement, about losing place in society, or sort of what I would refer to as exclusion zones, like the areas of society or kind of things that we manifest to prohibit certain classes of people from being fully in our world. So Yeah, it's a I would say in some ways it's my newest form of art, but it's the one that started at a very young age.
Nice, nice. I share the passion of paper, pen, and the look of writing, and it's something that I've got tons of journals that when I last moved, I was gonna get rid of them, and my daughter went, "No, when you die, I'm gonna read them." So I'm saving them for her.
Sealed until after the grave.
Exactly, exactly. I've always been one to just leave my journals out because I figure if you read them, then it's your problem. Because if you don't like what's written there, but the writing thing is really important. I find it important for processing how I feel about certain things, and poetry tends to have a way of bringing that through really powerfully sometimes. I think it makes a huge difference overall. So your life journey, tell me a little bit about, how you got to where you are today, because you are this really powerful woman doing exceptional work. And I know that firsthand because I'm watching you work at PWA, and just everything that you bring such a passion and light to it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to be this remarkable person that you are? Well, you obviously always were.
Sure. So I grew up in New Hamburg, Ontario, which
Mhm,
is when I grew up there, it was a very small town, and it was, like a mainly Mennonite and, conservative German community,
mhm,
settlers and farmers in southwestern Ontario. And, my family had, its background in the Mennonite community as well, and had left at a certain point to be a part of like the mainstream community there. And so when I grew up there, it was sort of like a time of like flux in the world. It was a time when many people were selling their family farms, that there was large corporations who were in the process of acquiring land in southwestern Ontario to sort of join properties together to make like mega commercial farms.
yeah,
And there was like older generation farmers whose children had taken over, and they were posed with a really tough life farming, and like very limited economic options. So when they were approached by these large corporations, um, it was not hard for them to make that decision to sell their farm. So during that time, like I remember at a very young age, we used to have like community celebrations in our town square, like Christmas tree lightings, and people would make sausages and summer sausage and different things like that. We'd celebrate like the traditions of that those communities, like the harvest and so on. And then throughout my early childhood, like those things eventually disappeared, and the actual residents of the town I lived in mainly disappeared as well too. So my early childhood was like marked by like a lot of that flux, and like the alienation that it brought from being in southwestern Ontario without necessarily like a link to cultural identity or like a a sense of self within a community. Like the fabric of community was disappearing.
yeah.
And I guess at the same time too, like it was being replaced with was there was an opportunity for very conservative churches, like evangelical churches, to support people who were feeling that way, with very rigid spirituality, and very rigid understanding of gender roles. And I was
Mm,
somebody who just uh, from birth never really fit into masculine gender roles, although I was born in male gender, and so I faced like a lot of challenges in my early life around gender-based violence, and and not really having a place to, find a good expression for myself. So those were my roots. But at the same time, where I found a lot of solace was in nature and in
Mhm.
like the areas around my town, playing in the Nith River, which was a very beautiful river at the time, and fishing and just enjoying life on the land. A very beautiful part of Ontario.
Wow. Yeah, I think getting connected to the land is one of the healthiest things we can do for body, mind, and soul.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a thread through my whole life. I mean, as my bio says, like I love to garden. I have a garden now, and I just love watching things grow. And now I'm sharing that with my son, and he very much enjoys both helping things grow and sometimes making the plants not
Ungrowing
grow.
them?
So yeah, pulling up flowers and stuff as well too. So yeah.
That doesn't change very early on. I remember years ago, I had a beautiful garden in the front of my house, all different flowers and things that, were good for the bees and all that kind of stuff. And I remember early spring one year, and my neighbor's son was seated in the middle of my garden. He's about 7, seated in the middle of my garden, surrounded by daffodils that he had ripped out of the ground. And I'm looking at him going, I think you ripped up all my daffodils. He went, I didn't do it. I went, oh, really? Well, let's go talk to your nanny about that. And his mom came over later and brought me some more. But there's something about little kids in the garden
Yeah,
wanting to plant or unplant.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, children have a way. I don't know, I just watch some of the things they do because I remember doing some of those things as a little kid and feeling quite happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's sweet, that's sweet. I think, teaching our children how to garden and how to connect with the earth is I think it's really an important responsibility as a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I think one of the things that I've learned from gardening really is um, our natural cycles are something that's been a part of our fabric of culture and community for a long time, regardless of who we are as people. That's like the most essential part of life, and we've been removed from the our understandings of those natural cycles, and it's caused a disruption in not just who we are as people, but how our society functions and how we understand our relationships with one another and what we do with the world around us. We have so much power as humans. I mean, especially as white people, to affect change on the natural environment and also with one another, and they're correlated. So, you know, for me, doing this, learning more, and it's always a learning process. Working with the earth and plants,
Yeah.
uh, it's taught me a lot about all of those things and how I would like to, like work to remedy, and but also it's caused me to understand things that my parents and my grandparents and their parents and so on, all of my relationships through time, um, have understood the world, and something that is that our capitalist system like works actively to take us away from.
Mm.
So that reconnection work is something I'm very passionate about sharing with my son as well too.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I love about Toronto is how lush and green it is compared to some cities. And that's something I'm really, really grateful for is the number of trees and parks and things like that that we have. And I remember doing ceremony down by the lake a couple of months ago and falling in. It was minus 10 degrees, and I was bringing an offering to the ancestors, and they wanted all of me. So there I was, submerged in Lake Ontario. What's interesting to me, though, is just that experience of being in nature and with nature and how natural that is for us. And I remember when Genevieve was really little, my other Gigi in my life, when she was really little, we'd go for walks and she would hug all the trees. She'd go into people's yards and hug their trees, and she just had a real connection with nature. She really, really loved it. And I think that's natural for us. And if we can help our city children come to an understanding of nature and the importance of it. Even when I went to Kenya, I remember somebody telling me that someone they had traveled to Kenya with ended up with a gecko in their room and they freaked all out about it. And she said, "That's the gecko's home. You're the visitor." And when I got to Kenya and I had a little gecko in my room, I was able to, instead of going, I was able to go, "Oh, okay, you're visiting. I'm the visitor. You're the resident. I'm just going to let that be." And of course, they don't bother you. They just leave you alone. But it was a nice segue for me to have somebody remind me of that.
Yeah.
And then I had to deal with all the monkeys, which was a little harder because they were, I swear, thousands of them, completely covering the full pathway where I was walking. So I was standing off to the side. I got some video of them, but it was a little bit like, wow, there's a lot. How safe do I feel? So I think sometimes we don't connect with nature because we feel somehow separate from it, but really we're a part of it. And we need to work how to get together with it.
Yeah, when I was young, I used to work on farms in the changing landscape that I spoke about, and one of them that I worked on was like a large scale turkey farm, and they had 4 barns that were football fields long, full of turkeys, and my job was to take care of them, but also to catch them and put them on trucks to be slaughtered. And a dream as a young person was to work my way up the farming ladder, because there was like older, guys that would come in their 20s, and they had like special jobs on the farm to inseminate turkeys, and they got paid better, and they were just seemed pretty like cool to a young person, like
Of
very
course.
young, working on these farms. And so uh, I really admired them, and you got to understand that there was very few people to like that were like possibility models at this stage of my life. There was very few people around in general, and so um, one day someone didn't show up for work, and I was asked to work with this group of guys, and I saw how terribly they treated the turkeys, to like basically murdered them, like just for fun, for no real purpose. And like the culture of this industrial farming kind of promotes this way of relating to non-human animals and the earth around us, if it doesn't have like a commercial value, that it's not really, there's no sense to its existence. And so I watched them, like really harm these animals. And I didn't really understand what I was feeling at the time. It actually took like a couple of years before I could fully like process, like kind of like a negative feeling in my heart. And it was like a feeling about masculinity as a whole. That was like a long journey in my life, and led me to work with men in pretty extreme situations for many, many years in federal prisons, and on the street, and in crisis centers. But it also was a journey of in opposition to the way that those early memories of the treatment of the natural world was under patriarchy. Like trying to find my own understanding of what was happening inside me. Yeah.
Yeah, so a combination of your own personal journey as well as the planetary journey of civilization.
Yes, I guess so. Yeah, in an immense kind of like a
Mm.
awakening, like, but not one that happened for, I would say 15 years after the fact of understanding who I was as a trans person. And,
Mhm.
for that 15 years after those experiences, like I still really wanted to be accepted as a man. And, what I was being modeled in the society around me was like a very rigid understanding of the toughest, most stoic, most aggressive, most
Mm.
um, non-relational person that I could be was the armor that I could wear to protect myself from being perceived as not masculine, or like working myself away from those early life experiences of gender-based violence for for a little kid who didn't quite fit in with the like the type of boys that I was growing up around. So um, I was searching for those figures who, were kind of like the tough biker criminal, whatever society was presenting as like the
Masculine.
epitome of masculinity in the 90s and early 2000s, which, as you probably know, was a pretty difficult time for masculine identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And so here you are today, this powerhouse of a woman, because you really do bring an incredible power to the work that you do, and a strength that's really remarkable given the journey that you've walked, because it couldn't have been easy. Like making the transition uh, couldn't have been easy in this world that we live in today, and with all the things that are going on, especially around trans rights and medical rights and all kinds of things. It's probably not the easiest path you've ever walked.
For me, when I decided when I actualized transitioning,
Yeah,
um, I felt like there was an opening in the world of
yeah,
trans visibility,
yeah,
uh, and uh, and almost immediately as I transitioned, that opening rapidly closed. And I think we're at a very difficult time in our planet, but especially in so-called Canada, for trans people, where there's a finger being pointed at us for a lot of harm in society, and it's very difficult. And I feel I like myself. I have a lot of privilege in society to be able to be who I am, and a loving partner, and like family that accepts me, and so on. But there's a lot of that's not the common experience
not the
for
norm.
transgender
Yeah,
people, male or female or non-binary, and I feel deeply for children who have limited voice and limited access to resist um, grown people who are showing up at their schools to protest their existence, or threatening them at activities and sports, and feeling fearful to walk down the street.
yeah,
But I also see the bravery of children to, in spite of all of that, be truly who they are. And it's almost like a indigo opening in the world that children have, so like they've let go of the concept of gender in so many ways that that had incarcerated us for such a long time in the gender binary.
yeah. The whole idea of gender is such an I don't quite understand it. I remember doing a rant about it a number of years ago because it just doesn't make sense to me why we're so stuck in that role of boy and girl, and it has to be like this, and it has to be um, the energy that is currently being projected onto the trans community. Does it feel a little bit like the way it used to be really pushed on gay men at the time? Like almost like we have to blame somebody for, pedophilia. We have to blame somebody for this. So we're going to, oh, yeah, a gay guy. Oh, yeah, it's got to be him, right? That's the person. Rather than realizing that it may very well be your spouse or your parent or your uncle or your aunt or, right? Like, I think there's a way we as humans don't want to take responsibility. We don't want to acknowledge what's really going on. So we project our fear wherever we see something that might be a little bit different than what we're accustomed to. Does that feel right?
Yeah. And part of my journey too was understanding the wound that men, have in their lives. So many men have in their lives. And, that really occurred to me when I started visiting federal prisons and
Mhm.
meeting with people who were serving life sentences, and and others, but a lot of folks who are serving life sentences, um, who almost 99% of people in prison that I met disclosed to me an early life experience of physical or sexual violence, often from an intimate family member or like a trusted person in their lives at a very young age,
Yeah.
when they weren't able to defend themselves or be believed in
Mm, yeah.
expressing that hurt. And you can see the trajectory that people have taken over their lives, that men take over their lives to, wear an armor that, protects them and protects them from even feeling the trauma that lives within them from those experiences that have been repressed by society, of what it means to be a man that is hurt, right? What it means to be a man that's been taken advantage of, or that's been, uh, that has had a rupture in their family unit. And I felt that in my own life from a different perspective of gender-based violence, of what I did to try and be somebody who couldn't be hurt anymore.
Yeah.
And really, what that did for me was cover so much of who I was as a person, that in turn, um, like the displacement of that hurt went on to others,
Yeah.
by my actions, by my who I was, who I wanted to be, how I wanted to be perceived in society. And that was a long process of undoing that
Yeah.
it took to remedy that. So when you talk about, now I'm a person who is, can support and be helpful in community movements, or work in power, uh, that's within me. That's the journey that I took to get there, and that's the journey that a lot of men take when they're incarcerated. That some of them never get to express that to the world around them. How
Yeah.
that story of reconciliation with the self has happened because of the punitive criminal justice system. And they likewise, when I was meeting people in prison, I met a lot of trans women who were incarcerated in men's institutions, uh, who had experiences of being hurt and hurting others
Yeah.
in turn. And like when we think about um, how society, or like an element of society, wants to put the notion of aggressivity or hostility or sexual hostility on gay, lesbian, trans people. Really, what I think about is this, this unseen hurt that so many people wear in their lives, and the dialogue that's really needed in our society for healing.
We need to talk. Well, we're going to take a quick little commercial break, And we'll be right back. So you're watching the New Thought Media Network. This is The Joy Show. My guest is Gigi Grant, and we'll be back in just a minute with plenty more. Don't go away.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
Welcome back. So we're talking about all kinds of things in our world today and the challenges facing so many of us when we don't talk about what's really going on or the harm that we've experienced. I think having conversations, this is where therapy can be so valuable, is just talking about what we've experienced so we can kind of see it. I do these goddess workshops, and I'm always surprised by how quickly people will open up when given the space. So one of the first exercises, we come together, we're together maybe an hour, and then I ask them to pair off and share their deepest, darkest secret that they've never told another human being. What fascinates me is they do it. And then they come together in the big group and share it again. Because I think once we share it once, it makes it a little bit easier to talk about, which means we can begin the process of healing.
Certainly, yeah. I remember I wanted to tell you just on the topic of visiting prisons, because it was a very like a potent part of my life and my
Yeah.
own growth. I remember being in a group, like in a room full of lifer prisoners, and who were working together. They wanted to have a group to talk about their issues and advocate for their rights as prisoners. And I remember sitting at this table, and there's all these big men, tattooed faces, heads, and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
just there's not much else to do other than work out. So they were pretty big. And we were going around the table, doing like a circle. And I was facilitating, and I got to this one person who was like the toughest looking guy in the room. And he's just like had his arms crossed. And he said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've realized we all need to pull in our chests and push out our hearts to one another. I was like, whoa, that is, when the room went silent. It was like tingling feeling among all of us of like this bravado needs to go, and we need to, have that sharing, that healing. And this is something that I brought, I think, across my work in the world, is that wanting to find that equanimity and restoring, our relationships with one another, and
Mhm.
seeing our gifts, right? Like really understanding what our gifts are as people. That we
Yeah.
all have gifts, and we all have something that contributes to the whole. So, through my work, what I really try and focus on is those opportunities for sharing the difficult stuff, but also for sharing that really brilliant stuff that we have in us, like that by that opening, we really get to those places where we have something so genuine that helps us all be better.
I love that example. Bring the chest in and let the heart out. Wow. I have a brother who works in the oil and gas industry. And when he started working for the company he's with right now, he's been there 16 years. He decided going in, he was bringing the love. So from day one, he's telling all these big burly guys, which he's one of them, I love you, man, and hugging people and telling them every single day that he loves them. And it's finally gotten to the point now where the women are going, excuse me, what about me? Do you love me? And so he's now able, they're confident enough in what he means by that, that the women are now wanting a piece of the action as well.
Oh,
Uh,
that's nice.
it's such a beautiful, I look at him and I just, he was one of these, fighters, like he would go to the gym. He hired some guy, I don't know, they did this no holds barred kind of fighting, was just kind of fun. But the guy he worked with, the trainer that he had, they would just beat each other into oblivion. But before they left at the end of a session, they hugged it out. Always. It was always, this is just how we exert energy, being big, tough guys. And, but then they bring the love. And Perry has brought that and saved the life of a young man who was going to jump off a bridge a couple weeks ago. And he stepped in and he just said, I love you. And the kid believed him and stepped over the railing back to the safe side. And it's like I look at the way we connect, and you said something earlier about when you were growing up, and it reminded me of, community dances where we would do silly dances like the butterfly and the what's that? Oh, the polka, and I'd be standing on my dad's toes while we did some of these dances, and just how lovely that was. And we
Mhm.
don't do that now. We need to.
When
How
I
can we
was
come back?
when I was going towards the end of when I was visiting prisons, which it wasn't that long ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago,
Yeah,
what I noticed was there was a very young cohort of people entering into the prison system, 17, 18, into, you know, like adult prison.
yeah,
And mainly from urban areas, not just Toronto, but Ottawa, Ajax, Pickering, Niagara, St. Catharines,
yeah,
areas around Ontario that where much like my experience in life, there was sort of like maybe a key industry that had left, or that there was like a migration for work in other areas, or that people were they became commuter cities and it lost the fabric of community that was
yeah,
there. And with the older group of people in prison, lifers and so on, they might have come from homes that were broken or communities that were not great, but they still understood what it was to have a family, or what it was like to have a community. And so it was possible to kind of vision forward what that would look like to build something like that together in resistance of unjust systems. That building community, building affinity, saying those love connections to one another was in resistance to what society wanted to enact as
Mhm.
like sort of repentance for people. But this younger cohort of people, I really noticed that it was much harder to find that fabric of connection between people, because they never knew a community that was
Mm,
together, or
right.
that had rituals, or they never knew they were raised by their grandparents, if raised by anybody at all, and that they didn't have that fabric of family to relate to in that same way, to get to that place of having trusting relationships with another person. And I'm seeing this more and more in our work in downtown Toronto, of people who are displaced, throughout Turtle Island, Canada, US, to Toronto, and from around the world, but especially from, where we are from here. That there's a real challenge to finding hope, finding love for self or other, because of the lifetime narrative of damage that's been done in people's lives. Now, remember, during COVID, we worked with houseless people in downtown Toronto to create encampment communities in resistance to displacement that was happening, and police actions against houseless people that were pushing them into very precarious situations, at a
Mhm.
time when there was no housing available and no shelters available for people. So we worked together to build encampment communities where people could, sometimes for the first time, have those relationships of care and trust amongst one another. And as soon as they were started, immediately they became a threat to kind of the status quo of what was happening. They were, taking up space in a city where every inch of space has become a commodity, and a
Mm,
unit of currency. So,
mm,
like all of the alleys and parking lots and vacant lots and buildings and places where people could exist in public space, it became illegal or illicit, and they were being very rapidly moved from those spaces in an attempt to kind of groom and recover from COVID, and reopen society. And I remember someone had overdosed, and I reversed the overdose, and it took a number of naloxone containers to reverse the overdose. And when I revived the person, they said to me, you know, I wish you hadn't revived me. And he showed me, he had a wallet and it was filled with money, and he was, like doing something that, provided a bunch of money, probably illicitly, to himself. He was like, none of this matters. It doesn't make me feel whole again. Uh, but we had like a long conversation. It was like, there's nothing I could do to really remedy the situation that he was in. But at the end of it, there was kind of a mutual feeling of like, for us having this moment of truth between one another. Like there was a little glimmer of what a vision of saying I love you to another person could be like, or saying, something deeper than just, what the regularity was. That,
yeah.
like I like to look for these windows of a vision beyond what we're living in, like the reality under capitalism that we live in now, that we haven't really experienced yet in my generation's lifetime.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just sitting here going, okay, we got to do a show about prisons. We got to do a show but residential school. Oh man, you'll have to become a regular. So much to talk about. Yeah, I noticed, for me, uh, I want people to know how precious they actually are. And so trying to remind people, uh, by a kind act or a kind word or a hug or I love you, to continually use those type of phrases. I know sometimes people might misunderstand, but I think it still matters, that it doesn't matter if there's a misunderstanding, if someone doesn't understand why you say I love you. But I think saying it and having people come to understand their own value and worth, and the fact that they are lovable, that this universe that we live in is a place of love, that many of us have forgotten because of the life journey we've walked, or the hurts we've experienced, or the trauma that's been in front of us. But I think the more we can come together and be with one another and have conversations. I remember a woman who was unhoused in Calgary. My son and I were heading out for dinner, and we were walking along the Stephen Avenue Mall, which is an outdoor mall in Calgary. And as we're walking along, there was a woman. She had her possessions in her shopping cart, and she was probably a woman of about my age. And she asked for some money, so I'm reaching in my pocket, and I give her some money, and I'm having a conversation with her. How are you today? And she's giving me kind of an odd look, like, you're being nice to me. What's that? And she said, people have been so mean. People would spit at her and tell her to go away. And I just looked at her and said, but by the grace of God, I could be you. So why would I do that? I just, how can I support you? Or, so I gave her what I had, and we had a brief conversation. And she was a bit surprised that somebody offered a kindness, which makes me sad, because that's the least we could do, is offer a smile or a kind word. You know, but I don't understand how we've gotten so far away from each other, that we can actually choose choose to spit on somebody, or to push them away, or to rip up an encampment and displace everybody, just because, like, those are the things that hurt my heart, and that I want to find answers to.
Yeah. And I think in part it's because we've entered into a time of having fiduciary relationships with one another as the first relationship we have with other people. What is the what can I derive from somebody that suits me, that supports me? It's almost like extractive kind of way of seeing the world around us, and it's unintentional. It's just like how our
Yeah,
society has progressed under capitalism, that we commodify everything, including like moments of time with one another. And what does that mean for us? Toronto's a great example of that. I moved here from other places, and when I moved here, I was shocked by people really, they almost like flex how important they are by talking about how stressed they are in their lives. That the more stressed you are, the more important you are as a person. So you talk about how I have all this stuff going on, and I only have like this amount of time, or for you, or for me, or for so on. And it's really about status.
it is.
And so it's very interesting, like how, coming from like an experience that's completely different from that in my own life, like moving to Toronto, what was really revealing about how these systems kind of work and where they come from. But I think in part what I learned about the magic of transness, because I think there's a little spark of magic in being trans, that
Yeah.
you know, like I really enjoy, is that you don't get to not be yourself, right? You just don't. You to be trans, to be actualized as a trans person, you have to be who you are, and that's like such a different expression for every single person.
Yes.
But what we give to the world, the magic that we give to the world, is by presenting the fact
Mm,
that you can be yourself, and that is resistance against a system that wants you to be in a productive form. And I think what it's taught me is that, when I really enjoy seeing people, be themselves and be
Yeah,
funky, and, keep that element of funkiness alive in our society by the things that they can offer to the world
yeah,
around them. And when you give them the opportunity, folks who have been discarded by society really have a lot to offer. And
yeah.
I think too about, I've spent a lot of time with people who hear voices in downtown Toronto. It's almost
Mhm.
like there's a some kind of push that brings people who hear voices to the downtown core. Maybe it's because there's um, you know more obvious surveillance when you're in kind of more private neighborhoods, and
Mhm.
you get anonymity in downtown. But also in talking to folks who hear voices who maybe uh, are in a different idea of reality than I live in, they often give me really interesting insight into the world around us, or things that they see that I cannot see.
Yeah,
Sometimes on a spiritual level, or spirits living in space, or like a connection to the creator, God, in
yeah,
ways that I can't feel, or a connection to even to myself and the things that they see, when they look at me, that may be happening in me or around me, that are profound. And I think we've really uh, you know, essentialized one version of reality, and pushed a lot of people outside of that, and made their inner worlds pretty violent, trying to resist and get back to that one stasis reality. But when you let people be themselves, like, their gifts really shine through all of that.
and that's I think, the greatest gift we can give to ourselves is that acceptance of who we are, because we came in with something that we're here to do, to bring, to be, and it's essential that we actually do with that, whatever that looks like. When I think about people who, hear voices and stuff like that, I just I'm reluctant to call it a mental illness. I sometimes wonder about the veil between the dimensions. Like, is there something, are they actually hearing something that truly does exist, but the average person has closed out so much that we aren't connecting? Because and you'll probably notice this with your son. When my daughter was little, and I know my older children as well, but I remember with her because she's young enough that I haven't forgotten everything yet. But I remember her having conversations with, people who had passed, people that she had never met who had passed, things she knew that she couldn't possibly know, and yet she did. One day she lays out her Barbie doll in our bed and she moves a lamp over so the light is right above the Barbie doll, and she goes, "Okay, step back. Dr. Louise is going to operate." Well, Pierre's godmother, his Aunt Louise, died when Genevieve was 1 year old, and she was probably about 3 when this occurred. And she had been a nurse in the operating room. Genevieve never knew that. I didn't know that. And she'd been retired for years before I met her. And yet somehow Genevieve had this feeling of an operation taking place, and she laid it out. And I thought, so I don't know, I'm just rambling, but I just sometimes wonder if we think we know stuff. And I think we know very little shit. It just,
I agree. And with my son, well, first of all, like, I'm so grateful for my wife, who is my partner in all of the things that I do, and is very supportive of me, and also it like helps me think about the world in lots of different ways.
yeah,
We often, in the early life of my child, we would often talk about how it seemed like he was sort of going back to the baby world, the kind of like the cosmic world where spirits come from. The veil is very thin for the first period of life, and that
Yeah.
Imagining him like continuing to receive information, cosmic information, send information back to the baby world of like what's going on in the world around him. So,
I love that.
like I think, we have lost a little bit of the joy of imagination about the way that the world exists. And part of people who hear voices, their magic is presenting to us different options for ways to see the world and see its spiritual nature.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, we're down to about 3.5 minutes, if you can believe it. Time flies. What one thing would you like people to take away from our conversation today?
Well, if it's okay, can I read a poem?
Yes, please. Oh, I love that. I love it.
Okay, so often I write poems, sometimes like for faith communities, like as sermons to get points across, or to convey something deeply personal. This is what I refer to as the fourth poem that I wrote, and it's very special to me. It's about a place that like I've seen, and it lives. It's a real place. So I'll read it to you now.
Awesome.
It's
Thank
called
you.
"Who Lives in the Horse House?" Who lives at the horse house? I've seen them through the window brushing their hair. Who lives at the horse house? The floor is marked up so much you would think a horse lived there. And I read that poem because I think that,
Love that.
to just encapsulate what we've talked about today,
Yeah.
what I'd like to describe, the point of the work that I do is really to continue to have that radical imagination of who we are as people,
Yes.
to not be confined by what we have been told to believe about ourselves, and to keep looking for the gifts of one another, to benefit our shared world for a much more just place for all of us.
Oh, you're awesome. You're awesome. I love that. And I love that poem. That is a beautiful way to end the show today. Gigi, thank you. Thank you. You are a radical powerhouse of a woman who is making remarkable change in our world. And I'm so grateful to know you and to be a little part of the work that's happening in the city of Toronto and beyond, because it will ripple out from here. Thank you so much. I think I would like to say in closing, let the imagination run wild. Find your actual voice. Forget what you were told, the boxes you were put in, the ways in which you may have been judged or critiqued, and stand in that power of who you truly are. Gigi, you're right. That is the magic. And I'm so grateful you found it. I'm working my way there. And hopefully, everybody who's watching the show will find their own unique voice and special way of being in the world. So, thank you. You truly are a gift.
Thank you so much, and thank you to your audience.
So grateful you're here.
Pleasure to be here.
You're watching The Joy Show on the New Thought Media Network. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and share this with everybody you know, because this message needs to get out. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Gigi. Thank you, Deja, for producing. Have a beautiful day.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.